Hello everyone, Jak Syn here on behalf of Fiend.com and Future Daze, and today it is another exciting episode of Artist Interviews. Today I am sitting with Seth and Vlad of ACP PRO. How you two doing today?
What's going on, everybody? We are pretty good, surviving in 2020 like I'm sure everybody else is, right? I had a pretty exciting week with a new project that is just gone out for pre-order, so that's the last bit of excitement we've had. So trying to keep our heads up with the things that we can do while we're all in the quarantine situation.
Yeah, we're about to, we're going to be on Electric Dream Records is releasing a vinyl, Dream Electric 3, where we've got one of our tracks on that vinyl. Pretty excited about that.
Yeah, I know I was just talking to you about watching the Teal interview just recently, and I think he's on the record too, along with probably a bunch of other people you know or have talked to.
I'm looking forward to that coming out, guys. I mean, I think that's great. I mean, you're making the most of your time during all of this. I think that's important. I know for everybody out there, like as creative people, I think that even with everything happening in the world and as bad and as messed up a lot of the stuff is, we are still finding time to create and push what we have out to the world in any way that we can. And we are adapting pretty well. I mean, wouldn't you guys agree with that?
Most definitely. I definitely miss doing shows. I get a big rush doing shows, so I can't wait for that to come back. But most definitely making the most of your time and doing projects that maybe you didn't have time doing, or, you know, trying new avenues for getting your music out there is very important.
Definitely right. Taking that time to learn something new, or taking that time to brush up on something that you haven't done in quite some time, I think that right there helps center us and balance us as human beings, even with all this happening. And we're staying safe, and we're keeping our keeping socially distant, and really trying to follow the procedures and rules as much as we can. But I mean, you know, sometimes it can be kind of stressful. It can be kind of hectic. But hey, we will get out of this a lot sooner if we just all work together. Am I right?
Absolutely. That is for sure the words of the wise, man. I mean, everybody should, just come together as a team, right? We all know how to do that. And the sooner we do it, the better off we're going to be.
Exactly right. And I look forward to getting back to live shows and live performances, because I'll tell you, doing these live streams, as amazing as they are, sometimes it just does not beat a live show. It just does not. But hey, when it's safe to do, we'll get it going again. I already know that. So today we're going to ask you guys a couple of questions and see where it goes from here. Are you two ready to get into it?
We are. What's the first question, Alex?
All right. What are three of your most memorable moments from your musical career together?
Looking back at what we've been able to accomplish to this point, a lot of the live show aspects, we've had the opportunity to play with a bunch of big acts, and every single one of them is different, and we get a chance to really develop and hone our sound, and just the energy we get from the live shows. We've had opportunities to play in Miami during
Art Basel,
the Art
it was actually our
Basel
first show.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if you're familiar with Art Basel, but down here, that's a giant extravaganza that's kind of becoming akin to sort of EDC in a way, combined with gallery art and film art, right? And so we actually hadn't played any shows yet, and one of our friends is very involved with the scene down there and said, well, you guys ought to kick it off by playing Art Basel on closing night. So we had to get our stuff together quick in order to make that happen and sound like we were, old pros, right? Even though it was a new sound and a new setup. And I think picking up on that, just going back maybe a couple of paces in terms of, what was the most memorable, I think for us it was also just the first moment of deciding to do the project, which was downstream from having worked on some bits of music that were going towards film and possibly television pilots. So basically visual media that we sort of stumbled into And then we were like, well, I guess it seems like we really do like this cinematic kind of sound. And he and I were over at the beach, and we're just floating around in a day where it was very calm, and kicking it back and forth and saying, this is really the project that we ought to do, but what should it really be? It can't just be, you know, any kind of music that would go to any kind of film. It's like we want to kind of pull it down into a center that is, you know, a little more identifiable. And we started to think about synthwave and horror films and, you know, movies that we grew up on. So that was also sort of a very memorable point, like the beginning of what you were going to start to do. Obviously, what just happened for us was a big moment, given that it's the first vinyl release that we will have done as a group yet. In many ways, we're still a fledgling group. And the thing that's happened for us is trying to spend a lot of time to really get our sound honed and developed before we tried to walk out into much of the public eye. You know, we didn't really want to go through that whole process out front. We wanted to kind of hone what we were doing and then come out and present a more wholly completed project, right? So at this point, you know, it's nice to start to see things like being able to get on a record happening, you know, especially being on a record with so many other acts who have garnered respect in the scene throughout the years before we ever even showed up in it. So that's another exciting moment for us. And I think that the other most recent one that's pretty relevant to where we're at now was the last show that we did,
Yeah.
which was a great show in St. Pete, where FM Attack had come down from Vancouver to play, and it was right on the cusp of the quarantine and the lockdown that was about to come, right? And so everybody was still living very normal life, and people were very hyped about this because, you know, it's FM Attack, right? And another really cool aspect of this was that normally when you go to a lot of synthwave shows, you'll see a setup that is kind of more of a band style setup, right? But we're also in electronic music, right? So one thing that you don't often see, at least I've seen less of, is a sort of continuous mix where you go in and it's like a club vibe and somebody is playing from the beginning to the end in a very DJ'd sort of style. And so we had talked to FM about that and coordinated it with the other local acts that were involved. And it was a real true like synthwave club night where, you know, the acts are playing and they're playing their own music along with music from other artists for hours on end. And we just had a real blast, like taking everybody till 4 in the morning. And then literally the next day, everything was locked down and you couldn't go do anything else. So it was the last party in a whole city, which was fun.
Wow. I mean, being able to do that, like really create that party vibe, and then all of a sudden, boom, shut down. I mean, that right there, putting the cherry on top right before all of this happening, you know, and here we are like, what, you know, it's been what, 5-6 months, you know, it feels like, but hey, you know, with everything happening, it's really great that like we are making the most of our time and we are really doing some amazing stuff. Getting back to some of the earlier things that you were talking about, like finding your guys' sound, you know, swimming through the waters of what you felt you guys wanted to be, and getting to that, like, yeah, finding those inspirations from, you know, yes, the cinematic vibe, but also like pulling from movies that you loved as a child or as a young person, you know, like being able to find that stuff. I know for myself, being heavily influenced by like, you know, of course, you know, horror movies. I mean, yeah, that's one, but like also sci-fi, like 90s and 80s sci-fi, like having those inspirations. I think one of the greatest things about these types of movies is that the scores that were done on them were just so amazingly memorable. And the thing about it is that a lot of people doing these scores were people who were scoring that in their garages or scoring it in a small little sound studio somewhere in Hollywood or wherever they were in the world, like being able to do that. And I think that's what makes these things so memorable, is that they were started out as such small little things that grew into just these blossoming flowers of creativity over the years. They really kind of stick with people. I mean, when you look back, you kind of think of like, hey, the Terminator, like the very first Terminator, the score written for Terminator was written in a garage. You know what I mean? In a garage. And you kind of go like, well, it's one of the most recognizable scores ever in the world. You know, so that's amazing. But I think you guys finding your way on that, you know, I'm sure, you know, had a little bit of, you know, had a bit of trial and error here and there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, most definitely.
Finding the sound through cinema and music seemingly came kind of naturally, and I think that mostly is because we're so equally invested in both in terms of fandom, you know? And so I think unconsciously we were just making music that tended to want to lend itself towards visuals. A lot of times our language of creating music, when we would talk to one another about what should happen next, what sound should play, would be done in terms of a visual scene rather than talking about an instrument or a note. And so I think that was like our expressive language of actually creating music a lot of times was like, oh, it's like when this happened in this part in this film or this kind of a sequence and so on and so forth. So I think that we just kind of maybe missed the obvious for a little while before we really just dived off completely into doing this sort of music that, hey, that's our language and that's what we need to embrace, right?
Yeah. You know, like visual representation through the use of sound.
Right.
Yes. One of the things that we did for Able Archer 83, which was our first album, is rather than starting with the music and building around that, we actually started with visuals that we wanted to represent in the album and worked our way from that point, which was a different shift for us for sure.
Yeah, we started out by basically putting like, you know, you put visuals on your phone, you put them on the back of your computer, you'd sit down and watch films. Like we just really tried to fill our heads with as much ephemera as we could, right? Before we sat down to even play the first note, so that it wouldn't have to be one of those things where we would need to constantly reference. We had sort of built this framework in our minds and we're like, okay, now that this is all stuck in here and floating around constantly, we can just sit down and go to it by feel, and we won't really have to think. We can mostly flow, which worked out pretty well. I highly recommend it for people who like cinematic music.
I think as we as human beings, you know, for years, I think we are a very visual culture as human beings. Like we are very visual, and we, you know, like all the time, you're saying on our tablets, on our phones, on our computers, we have visual representations of things that inspire us. And we look at those things, and when we look at them, we kind of go, this fires us up. This makes us feel good. This makes us feel something amazing inside of ourselves every day when we see them. When you're able to pull all these little things from things that inspire you over the years, you're really able to create some magic, especially when you're dealing with music. For myself, I am very visual. You know, I'm very visual. I look at things and I go, wow, that's very beautiful. I love to draw things. I love to, you know, work with colors here and there. So when I see things that visually strike me, I go, well, in my head, I kind of think, well, what might this sound like? What might this visual representation sound like in a way? Yeah. So, and I know to some people that kind of might be a little weird, or that might be a little, you know, like, I don't understand that. Well, if you think about it, you sit down and you see a picture, like you look at the Mona Lisa, right? What would the Mona Lisa sound like? What would it sound like to you? And I think you just have to ask yourself that question as a person, like, what does that sound like to me?
Yeah, you know? Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm 100%, man. As far as that's concerned, I think that colors have different textures, combinations of colors have different textures. And the same goes with music, and the type of textures that you put out there is basically your sound. So.
Yeah, Vlad's always been a painter. So, you know, even going back to our first days DJing, you know, we'd finish up a set and then he might go in the other room and paint a picture that was, you know, just felt inspired by having sat in the room and listened to mixing for 2 hours, right? And this goes back to when we were teenagers. So yeah, absolutely. I think that the two things work really well together. And I think that's one of the reasons why I probably was so taken by film with great scores, because it's like, wow, you get these two things for the price of one, right? You've got an amazing visual story going on. You've got an amazing musical story going on. Neither one of them suffering from the other. Hopefully they're both helping one another create, you know, a bigger experience. And I think, honestly, what we try to do is allow people to create those visuals without having that screen in front of them. But certainly when we play at a show, we have a lot of visual presentation there for people to be able to put those two things together in the way that we would present it. I remember coming down off the stage in one show, and this girl walked up to Vlad and I, and she said, wow, it felt like I was like in some kind of a Tarantino movie at a show for like the last, 45 minutes, which, is a great compliment, because it meant that she felt like it was immersive in some kind of a way. And she understood like the kind of referential nature of what we were doing. And she was explaining in the way that she understood, which is, I've seen Quentin Tarantino movies, and that's, the way I think of kind of what you guys are doing here in this live setting. And, so I think that when you're able to put your art out there and people can take from it to some degree what you intend, you know that your art's evoking the things that you hope that it would, right?
You're definitely right there. And I think that I really do believe that. I really do. That when you're able to create a setting that feels immersive in a way for somebody, you are invoking all types of feelings from everyone in that audience, like triggering emotions, like something that inspired them as a child, something that inspired them even as an adult. I think that that's why when you look at some of these other, some other events, some other artists out there that have visual representations, you kind of go like, some of them might be really dark representations, some of them might be really beautiful representations, but I think it's all part of the artistic journey, and it really is a beautiful medium when you're able to do that. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, most definitely. I want to just add one thing, something that we do that I don't know that a lot of people do at their live shows. We have visuals going on while our music is going on, and all of those visuals are mixed live every single time. They're different every single show. So I really try to pay attention to the crowd and help put the visuals on the same page with how people are reacting and how the music is going.
Right. So there's sort of, I guess, a bit of an improvisational element to, what's going on in terms of what you're seeing, to make it where it's not a stilted thing or a repetitive thing, but it's more like of a feel and a response to what's going on. And that's something that we really try to place a lot of importance on in terms of how we want people to be able to experience it,
Which is definitely a great addition, because you never know. You're never going to get the same show twice, which is good. Thinking on your feet, exactly, and that's what it's all about. What would you say is your favorite release that you've worked on?
So we've only released one full album to this point, partially because, we like to plod along and like tweak and get it exactly to this particular kind of place, especially because we want it to be very coherent and to some degree conceptual. When you're dealing with something that's meant to be visual, then for us, it's something that needs to play a bit like a film might. And in particular, in Able Archer 83, what we did was we tried to have something that played like soundtracks or scores, because when we were growing up, a lot of times you'd have the score element, but then you'd also have very particular soundtrack elements where an artist's song came into the movie, right? Like a good example might be Body Double, where you have the score for Brian De Palma's movie, but then in the middle of it, the video for Frankie Goes to Hollywood plays, Relax, Go To It, right? And so in order to do something like that, we tried to have these moments where it was very score, and then also very much like something you would have pulled from the soundtrack of a film like that, right? And to be able to play from beginning to end in a cohesive kind of a manner. And I think that that was really important to us to be able to show that, at least to ourselves anyway, that we could pull something like that off. Because then you want to be able to move on and do individual songs that can sort of demonstrate that without somebody having to listen to it for 45 minutes or 60 minutes, right? That, you know, you can get the pocket version. And as we developed our sound and working on that, I think we're able to get, you know, something that happens across an entire arc, sometimes inside of, you know, 4 to 6 minutes. So that one was very important for us. And, you know, it was also something that we were talking about thematically, because we wanted to make a connection between the way that people were reacting, in particular to horror films in the late 70s and the early 80s, and what was happening in the world, because we were trying to say that these movies had something to do with the psychology of the way people process what they're going through. As I'm sure we're going to get a lot in terms of the art that is to come in the years downstream from where we're at. I'm very excited to see what people are going to make as a result of the last few years, you know?
As far as releases that honestly, the next release is the most exciting for me, but isn't that the answer everybody has? I'm really excited about the next one coming out. I can't wait till you guys hear it for sure. But, you know, each one of the projects that we've put out, whether it be the album or singles, we've got an EP ready to go that we haven't released yet. Not sure when we're going to do that. You know, the energy has all been different, and I've loved every single moment of it.
Well, you know, I am excited about hearing you guys' new music. I'm excited about that because I know it's going to be amazing. When you go back to the album, Able Archer 83, from Shadowgate all the way to Final Girl, it is a journey. It really is. To everybody out there, if you haven't heard Able Archer 83, you should check it out because it is, in a way, a cinematic journey. It really is, because you have a lot of influences that you pull from that you can hear in the album, a lot of waves, you know, where you have a lot of different emotions that you're conveying throughout every song. If it was to be a score for a movie, it could work. It really would work that way, because that's how it is, that's the way it comes off. It's conveyed like that. And you guys really put a lot of attention to detail in that release. You really did. And you can really pick up on that. A lot of the different influences you've injected into it. Kudos to you guys. Hats off. Good stuff.
I appreciate that.
We definitely are you know, really detail oriented, mainly because, you know, I think you are trying to create, like going back to this, a visual when there isn't one. And so you're giving cues where people can say, oh, you know, I felt like I recognize that little bit from something, but I don't know exactly what. But then there's this note that's with it, and it makes me feel something else, and it starts to help paint some kind of a landscape or a feeling, right? And also, it was, to some degree, pulling from other artists that we thought were very good at expressing visuals in a musical art form, like, let's say, Wu-Tang Clan, right? You understood, like, this whole picture of this world from the way that they were pulling these sounds and the samples. And I'd also say, you know, a group like White Zombie, right? Or a Ministry. You know, I could give you probably a whole laundry list of different folks that were able to do that. And I think you're right, Jackson, when you say, like, we're more and more visual. So I expect music to continue to be more and more visually oriented. I know that a lot of folks now make music with the sensibility of how it would sound or feel inside of a game, right? Because games are so immersive now. And so I think that's the kind of place that we're going. And I'm really excited to see, you know, how that changes music.
And because we are so visual as a society, you do see music heading in that certain direction. You know, like when they talk about, like, life imitates art, art imitates life, you kind of go, like, we are headed into the next, I guess, the next spectrum, I guess you could say, would be, like, a lot of popularity has been coming from, like, cyberpunk culture nowadays. There's a lot of popularity coming in that, because I think a lot of us see this world around us as this kind of high-tech, low-life world that we're living in, where we feel like we can't trust anything that's going on in the background. We can't trust that people are going to say the right thing. People are going to say, are going to be there for us. We can't, you know, we're also a very sarcastic culture. I mean, I don't know, you know, for a lot of other countries, I know it's, you know, different, but for America, I think a lot of us, we're very sarcastic nowadays. Like when you look at meme culture and the people like the eye rolls that you get from people.
Right.
I mean, it's we're making light of situations that are happening because it helps us cope with our reality. It can be very frustrating, but I think that we're headed, the way we're at now, we're in a very visual culture, and you can see a lot of the music that is being done now is feeding off of that visual culture.
Yeah.
And I think what you were saying earlier too is very interesting about you would love to see what kind of art comes out of these past couple of years that we've been living in. And I think we're seeing that. But I'm really seeing I'm starting to see as we're coming out of this, I'm starting to see more and more representation of what we've been dealing with for the past 6 months. Mm-hmm. As really being a big factor.
You picked up on a thread that is definitely always been very important. So I'll just kind of maybe open up an element as we're talking about the album earlier, and you're talking about the way that people are processing the time that they're living in, and they don't trust these things. They have these kind of systems that are massive, and they're close to their normal lives, but the people who run them seem very distant, and it's all kind of a big mystery, and something seems kind of off, right? And for us, naming the album Able Archer 83 was an example of trying to say, look, people were living in this Cold War period of time where they were worried all the time about whether or not everything was going to end tomorrow, right? But they didn't have a way to face that down or alter it in a direct fashion, and they needed ways to process that. So for us, it was like looking at people that created the characters like Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger or the Terminator. Like, they share these characteristics of being these unstoppable forces that don't really have a particular, human persona that you can wrap your hands around. It's just something that you have to contend with for an hour and a half or 2 hours. But then you can leave and go, okay, I'm in the parking lot and things are all right again because I'm going home and I processed this emotion for a while, and I get to kind of go through this experience of scaring myself so that I can come out the other end and go, you know what, maybe things aren't so bad and we still have an opportunity to change the direction of the way we want to go, and not to be too, high-minded about it all, but I do think at the end of the day, the way that things move in society has a lot to do with the way that we individually just kind of, decide to start thinking about things a little bit differently, start taking small steps a little bit differently, ultimately. And art helps us do that. It helps us think about these things in ways that are not so direct, that maybe don't ping us in ways that a political meme would, right? To your point.
We need to classify this time period not as the information age, but the disinformation age.
Yeah. Because
there's more people don't trust the information that's provided in front of them.
Right. So we're all looking for new ways, and I think for us, doing this internally is a way to find a light in some level of darkness, as I'm sure that's true for most people who've done art throughout time, right? Back to the cave paintings with the fire on the wall.
Exactly. And you know what, to touch on this point that you brought up, it's well, I wonder what the visual representation of this past pandemic, I wonder what the visual representation will be when we finally come out the other end. What is the new monster that will be created? A literary monster, a visual monster that will be created dealing with this time that we dealt with. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. What new slasher will come out of this?
Yeah, it's the thing you have to look forward to. What? These crazy times always give us great art, and that is something that for everybody in this world is very near and dear and close to them. So, hey, take the silver linings where you can, right?
Definitely right. What was the drive behind getting you guys into making music and performing?
For me, as far as getting into music, I picked up a guitar when I was a teenager and started playing in bands and just felt the rush of performing live and the creative aspect of making music from beginning to end. I thought it was I knew that it was something that I always wanted to do. And when we came together as a group, I've known Seth for since I was a teenager, and we've had the opportunity to go down different paths of the music industry, from DJing to producing artists to producing film scores. To it's just something that that's what really drives me, is really the excitement of the live shows and being able to create.
What was inspiring to me probably the most was when you're younger and you hear music that really just makes your hair stand on end, right? Or you watch something that has that kind of effect. Or maybe in the case of what we're talking about, you get both at the same time, right? I was like, I want to be a person who can do that for someone else, because then they're going to want to do it like now I want to do it. And it's almost this weird pay it forward thing where it's like somebody did that for me and it made it feel so special and amazing. And I just can't wait to be able to do that in my own way and hopefully have that effect on someone else. Even if it was over one person, like that would be enough, right? I mean, just to say like that you gave somebody that same inspiring feeling that you had, or at least a portion of it, that made you discover that you wanted to do something creative, I think it's just maybe the most amazing gift, So for me, it was very inspired by that. And, I think hopefully, whether now or in the future, we can help people who want to access that creative aspect of themselves go, yeah, I heard that. And that really was the thing that made me decide I just want to go out and make some myself.
I think for a lot of us, as artists, it's like going back to the things that inspire us. I mean, you're right. Like seeing something when you're younger and going like, this speaks to me in a certain way. Like whether it's a movie or a video game or some type of visual representation, a picture, whatever it is.
Right.
Something that scares the wits out of you can really inspire you to do some amazing things. And then going to like what you were touching upon, Vlad, like with picking up a guitar, picking up an instrument, kind of like tinkering around, figuring it out, kind of just making the most of it. Whatever you want to convey as an artist, you'll find a way to do that. Whether it's a pen to paper, a computer screen, a DAW, whatever, a synthesizer, an instrument, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is that you pick up, that's your weapon. That's your weapon to convey your art to the world. There's no roadmap, there's no plan to what you're doing ever, because that is the beauty of art. There is never going to be somebody telling you, you have to do it this way, you have to do it that way. It's always what you feel in your core.
Absolutely. You guys, in the Teal interview, since I just recently rewatched it, you guys went down a pathway of talking about exactly what people use to create their art. And he was talking about something that I think a lot of us can relate to, which is that you start out with this kind of like, hey, there's some guys across the street and a couple of them are in a band. And I know a couple of people who play some stuff. Maybe we could form a band, or we could be the other part of the band that they haven't completed yet, or whatever. And it's not like overwrought at that point. And then time goes by and you want to get better and you buy more stuff and you buy more software, more, hardware, more instruments, right? And people forget things like the fact that Kurt Cobain played most of the original Nirvana stuff on a Mustang guitar that he bought at a pawn shop, right? And so ultimately all that's nice, but at the end of the day, you're going to make really creative stuff if you're willing to sit down and get creative. And a lot of times, if you're boxed in a bit by what you have available, you are forced to be a little bit more unorthodox, and you're going to come up with things that are more interesting than if you have just the endless world of options that you can create for yourself over time. And sometimes you go, okay, I've got all this, but actually, I find myself still using like this program from 9 years ago. We watched an interview with Justice, and they were talking about how they would purposefully like limit the number of pieces that they would use on a particular project so that they would be forced to create within a kind of a box and have to get interesting with it, right? So I think that, to your point, nobody should ever feel limited in terms of being able to pursue an artistic goal. I mean, just grab something and, interesting things will inevitably happen if you really want to pursue it.
Exactly. And grab it and use it to its fullest potential all the time. Because you'll find out things that you didn't even know about yourself that you could do. What are you guys looking forward to accomplishing the most moving forward?
I think that we have a lot of different goals that we'd like to eventually hit. But I think from my side of the coin, I really look forward to being able to do a full-length film project sometime in the future. And in addition to be a significant part of maybe a game project that fits with the kind of themes that we do. You know, I think that we're going to continue to make songs and continue to make EPs and albums and collaborate with other musical artists. But I definitely look forward to being able to take on those kind of projects as we find ourselves with more opportunities to try to, you know, create with folks who are from the visual realm or from a game creating realm. So that's something that I think that we will eventually spend a fair amount of time on, and I look forward to it.
Yeah, that's good for me too.
So ditto.
You know what? That's a good realistic goal right there. That is a good solid goal, like being able to do that. I remember in an early interview when I was talking to Thought Beans, his thing was like he wants to score a blockbuster movie. I mean, he's worked in TV and stuff like that with scoring those things, but he wanted to work on a blockbuster movie. Sometimes artists are like, this is their big goal. They want to score something, whether it's a video game, a movie, a TV show, it doesn't matter. Getting their music out there and creating that visual representation for somebody to feel emotion when watching something is amazing. And then you have other artists that are like, I want to tour the entire world. I want to go everywhere. I want to see everything. I want to play shows all over the place. Different successes for different people. It's like sometimes we're inspired by other people's successes, and sometimes we try to base our successes on other people. But no, your successes are always going to be different from somebody else's. Your dreams and aspirations will always be different from somebody else's. And I think you guys stepping into that next realm of scoring a movie or scoring a TV show or scoring a video game, I think that is an amazing next step for you guys. And I look forward to hearing you guys in a movie or something, going to the theater and be like, hey, I know who scored that. I know who did that. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. Yeah, we've got some of those opportunities that are bubbling around, and we've actually worked on an independent horror film. So we've gotten our chops together, having done the initial cut, which was about 35 minutes up to the point where they were at, and that was a really interesting process in terms of dealing with not only our end of it, but what's going to ultimately have to happen with the effects editor, what has to happen with the visual editor, where all these things have to sync up at the end of the day. And so there's all these other bits that you start thinking about in terms of how you have to approach that. But for sure, also, when you mention people, going out and playing, there's no doubt that that's something that we're really interested in and want to do as much as we can. But I think that to some degree, we feel like we've learned the bit about how to do a show. It's just a question of now, how many more do we do? Who all do we do them with? And how much more could we add to it versus taking on projects that are more unfamiliar. You're dealing with, okay, well, we know horror, but then somebody gives us a drama about something that happened in 1875, or somebody has a game that is, based in something that we weren't really thinking about. And now we have to approach that in a way that we haven't thought about before and go back and get creative again. So I think that we're looking forward to all the opportunities, but it's mostly about challenges. That's what you find interesting, I think, as artists. At least I know I do.
You're right, challenges. And when you're presenting with these challenges, sometimes the best art comes from thinking on your feet. When you're presented with these kinds of challenges of like different types of ideas, especially like a different time period, it's like, how does that time period sound to you? Like, what would invoke emotion from somebody seeing this kind of thing on screen? Like, what kind of sounds would make it work? So I think going down those roads, the possibilities are endless. They really are. They really are. And I think you guys can really invoke some amazing stuff when you guys put your minds to it. What positive message would you give your fans out there?
The message that we would convey to fans and just kind of people in general you know, if I were to talk to him in conversation on a day-to-day, has a lot to do with how you move forward in life without being overwhelmed. Because in today's day and time, we have a lot of layers on top of everything that is just our regular life that can feel fairly overwhelming and fairly outside of our control. And the reality of it is, before those things were around, we were stressing about some kind of other stuff, right? It's always present to some degree. And in terms of progressing, I think doing art in the way that we've done it has taught us a lot about not trying to like look at the top of the mountain, but basically go, okay, there's a mountain up there and I'd really like to climb that, but right now I have to look at every step that's in front of me. And if you do that enough times, right, if you just keep concentrating on the very next step, eventually you'll look out and you go, wow, I guess I got to the top of this mountain that looked almost impossible to climb, right? And so whatever it is that people are contending with, I think that really trying to just turn it into things that are really manageable, especially if you're trying to start out with a project like we were, that's brand new, with a sound that you're trying to figure out, and there's already a lot of people doing it who are already way more successful than you are, and you haven't even played a single show or hit a single note, right? Like, just getting past that hump and also not constantly comparing yourself to people who are further down that road, right, is what allows you to get free of all of this anxiety and elements that, you know, might make you make decisions that aren't really the best for you in terms of how you want to do your projects. You know, you just worry about getting to the next thing that you're trying to do, you know, and then you're going to do something that's really true to what you want. And it's going to come out at the end of the day with something that you look back on and go, wow, I am really happy about that. I'm satisfied with what I did there, and now I'm going to do the next thing.
Not only that, but just stay positive. We're going to get through all of this, and hopefully at the other end of this crazy situation, everybody's going to be okay, and we're going to be able to move on and start doing shows again.
Yeah, and I'll get in the same room and have those positive vibes and the, you know, energy shared like we're all used to doing. So, you know, again, that's all about small steps, whether it's, you know, the big things that are going on out here or the little things that are going on in our life. It's just stay positive and, you know, keep striving, and, you know, things will turn out better. All of a sudden you look back and go, wow, you know, like you know, in this case of us, like made an entire like cinematic sounding album, whereas at one point there was literally zero and we'd never done one before, right? So it's kind of magical in that way if you just put your mind to things and, you know, you chop them into these bits where you figure out how you can get to places that you haven't been before.
Definitely right. Everybody out there, wise words, everybody, from ACP Pro here, guys. Sometimes when we look at the mountain can look like an arduous task to get to the top. It can look so large. It can look impossible to do. But when you break it down into the little steps, and you work every single day to reach that large goal. We're talking about knocking out little goals here and there. If you can set yourself to do that every single day in whatever it is in your life that you are working on, you will achieve great things. You really will. And everybody out there, keep positive. Try to stay as positive as you can. When you wake up in the morning, think positively. Throw on some amazing music that you love to listen to. Do something a little bit different if you feel like you're in a routine. If you feel like the day is the same day over and over again, break it up. Do something different. Find pleasure in the little things. And learn from the things that have come before. Learn about new things. Explore. Experiment. Create. Because right there, those things will take you to new and exciting places every single day. So thank you, Seth and Vlad, for taking this time to sit down and do this interview today. Thank you to everybody who took the time to tune in and watch us have this conversation. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe to our Fiend YouTube channel, as we have many more awesome artist interviews on the way, just like this one with ACP Pro here today. Thank you again so much, guys.
Thanks, Jackson. Really appreciate it, man.
Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys for sharing your story, and I look forward to your new music and everything awesome you guys have coming out very, very soon. Everybody out there, be sure to check out their amazing music and all of their awesome releases they have out all over the place, because these guys are going amazing places. See you guys really soon.